it's been really interesting watching this new approach from Reform. It's pugnacious. I think it will, it'll rile up their supporters, and some people might think, you know what, good for him, he's coming out swinging. But I think for a lot of other people, it adds to this sense of distaste, or there's an ugliness to it all, or why can't he just answer why doesn't he just answer the questions instead of picking a fight every time? And I think that creates a bit of a ceiling to his vote. My thought for today, to continue on this theme, is about it's about Nigel Farage's ceiling, really. It's been really interesting watching him use what a lot of people have called a Trump playbook in the last couple of days. It's people versus the establishment. It's the mainstream media and the establishment are trying to stitch me up and stop me, but the people want it. And it can be quite effective. It can solidify your base. It can create a real sense of grievance, and it means that even true stories or very well presented and accurate stories can be dismissed as fake news, or it's another stitch up by the establishment. So it can be quite an effective tactic, but I do think it comes at a cost, because we're not in America, and Farage he has a lot of support, is very popular. He doesn't have that kind of cultish, no matter what, shoot someone on Fifth Avenue support that Trump has. People would never storm, I hope, Westminster on behalf of Nigel Farage. And I don't think people have the same attitude to things that look venal in this country, or things that come across as greedy. I think we have a different attitude to money in public life, different attitude to money, full stop. So it's been really interesting watching this new approach from Reform. It's pugnacious. I think it will, it'll rile up their supporters, and some people might think, you know what, good for him, he's coming out swinging. But I think for a lot of other people, it adds to this sense of distaste, or there's an ugliness to it all, or why can't he just answer why doesn't he just answer the questions instead of picking a fight every time? And I think that creates a bit of a ceiling to his vote. This time last year, if we were here, we'd be saying, well, what could possibly stop Reform? They were, above 30% in the polls, maybe even on their way to 40. I don't think we see them like that now. That's not to say their support will collapse. It definitely won't. But it is to say that we're starting to see a bit of a ceiling emerge, and it's in the mid-20s, could be even lower than that, and that makes them a different proposition.
It would be interesting to see what has happened to the strength of the Reform vote and the Farage vote in Clacton since the general election. Now, we'll talk about this in just a moment. Could he now be left to fight the by-election pretty much on his own? Certainly without the support of without the opposition of the Tory party, who were in by far and away the strongest second place. Labour were behind them, and the news has just come in. Heard it from Ollie Cole a moment ago. The Tories are not going to contest Clacton. In which case, you would wonder, well, maybe why would Labour contest Clacton in that place? They were 10 points behind the other Tory party, Joe.
But the question, John, as well is, do the media actually participate in this or not? Because the other question is that, given the attacks on the media from Nigel Farage, do the media actually play along with the other parties and say, we don't cover it? Because actually, do you need to cover a by-election? Do you have to cover a by-election? If Nigel Farage ends up standing against Count Binface, does it need to be just a small mention?
It's a really good point.
And actually, the media could almost call his bluff, because then he doesn't get the big audience. He doesn't get the big opportunity. The people of Clacton probably go, flipping heck, there's a bit of a circus, but maybe there is no circus. Maybe this almost passes without event. And Nigel just kind of has a few weeks where he maybe puts his feet up, eats lots of ice cream, sits and looks at the sea in Clacton, turns up at the polling station, wins anyway, but it hasn't given him the platform. Because that's I think the bigger question, not about if everyone else is standing and you cover it, then there's broadcasting rules around an election. But actually, if you all just ignore it and this is being treated as a stunt, then fundamentally it is just Nigel actually could look a bit foolish. And so I think there's a really, if I was the boss of Times Radio, or I was looking at, the various newspapers, including the Times, who Nigel took a pot shot at today, I'd be saying, do you know what? Do we even really want to participate in this? Because it changes the whole thing.
I think it would be right to cover it, but it's the extent and intensity of the coverage. I think you ask a really good question, particularly if there are not candidates standing, because what Farage is really after with this by-election is a narrative shift, and it's a change in the conversation. It's less talking about all the money and more talking about, as he said, people versus the establishment. So I do think that and he does crave attention. He does like attention, as all politicians do. So starving him of some of that oxygen, if indeed it is going to be an uncontested walkover, and it does mean that hundreds of journalists don't need to decamp to the Moon and Starfish or whatever it is on the seafront in Clacton and bother the poor locals again. I mean, we've all been down there many times before, and they do roll their eyes at you slightly sometimes down there, and I don't blame them for it.
Yeah, I'm guessing if it turns out, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, if it turns out that he's basically got a clear run, apart from maybe Count Binface and one or two others.
And I really hope Count Binface goes for it.
Do you? Yeah.
I voted for him in London. I am a big fan of Count Binface.
What if he won, Joe? I mean,
well, okay. I'm going to leave that for my thought for tomorrow, because I have a question to pose about that matter.
If Nigel Farage is given that sort of clear run, I suppose the first thing he'd do is to use his, in quotes now, by-election campaign to make all sorts of announcements about reform UK policy. So they would have to be certainly covered more than they would any kind of stump speech in a by-election with only one realistic outcome. We can talk about this, and also if it is a clear run, what about the turnout? Who's going to bother to turn out in a one-way, one-horse race? And turnout could turn out to be significant. If you're saying this is the people of Clacton representing the people of Britain being given an opportunity to have their say, and the turnout is 32%.
But what it does achieve for Farage is a point of defence. If he wins, which we assume he will, if the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards then comes back and says, well, actually he should be forced to fight a by-election, or he should be suspended, or whatever they potentially come back with, he can say, look, I've been to the people of Clacton, they support me, I've won a fresh mandate knowing all these allegations were out there, let's get on with changing Britain.
Well, it wouldn't be up to the Commissioner. The Commissioner,
well, they would recommend
the House,
something.
they would recommend possibly, if he's found in breach, they could recommend a lengthy suspension, which opens the door to a recall petition, which could in turn lead to another by-election.
Sure.
If he's then already won in this coming by-election, they may think, what's the point of a
all the people in Clacton
petition?
Would be like, we're knackered, we don't want another one.
Yeah, and what party's going to sort of push that?
But in a sense, that I don't think the goal of his enemies or opponents here is ever really to sort of try and lever him out of Parliament. The point is to get to the bottom of his funding, and for people who are his critics to get him to answer the questions and explain what are some quite sort of troubling allegations and some quite troubling reporting.
Yes.
I think they missed a trick. I actually think what he should have said was, I actually think we need to lead the way in clearing up the rules. We need all parties to sign up to actually how we're going to ensure that funding there are no grey areas, that funding is transparent. He could have tried to lead some sort of...
Nigel Farage could have been the champion of transparency.
He could have effectively tried to be, he could have tried to say...
At what point would that have been possible?
Well, I think the point would have been that he could have said within, I read the rules. The rules were that, I was able to take gifts from friends.
At the beginning of the Parliament.
He could have quite quickly, even recently, he could have said, I think the point is the establishment is now judging me, that when you look at these rules, look, they're vague. I interpreted them like this. They're a mess. I actually think we should all be signing up to clearing these up and making it absolutely, there are no grey areas whatsoever. But
quite difficult though, Joe, to raise the flag of a champion of transparency after you've been outed by the Guardian.
Agreed, but he still maintains that these are personal gifts and there's nothing to see here. So if he really believes that, he could have led that charge, and he's going to have to answer some of those similar questions in a by-election campaign.